Okay, everybody, are you ready, Sean?
I'm always ready, Sandra. Oh, not quite. A, B, start that again. No! A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Google Plus for you and me.
I had problems with the blocks again.
Oh, Sandra, terrible.
I need to do, Manny, you've got to help me on the block someday. Okay, hi, I'm Sandra Watson, and welcome to Rockin' the Blocks with the ABCs of Google+. I'm delighted that you decided to join us today live if you're here, or if you're watching us on the recorded version, and so are my co-host and my guest, whom I will readily introduce to you in just a few seconds. We're going to be talking today about Google Plus and how it changes us, or does it? Can it? Will it? I don't know. We have discussed this. So before we get into that, I want to introduce my co-host, Sean Mon.
Sandra, thank you so much. The first thing everybody will have noticed, particularly those that haven't joined us for a long time, is that I still can't sing. I am trying to do my very best, and I'm permanently inspired by Sandra, but obviously my vocal cords aren't, so my apologies for shocking all of your delicate sensibilities with my singing there. But a real pleasure, as always, Sandra. Great to see Manny as well. Do you want me to say anything in particular, or shall I just ramble on for a couple of minutes?
Well, no, you know, some people may not know who you are, and so let's let's tell them who you are and what you do and why you're on Google Plus.
Okay, in that very order, who I am, Sean Marn. You can probably tell that I don't come from the same side as the pond as a number of you. I'm over in the UK, very near London. What I actually do is I took the plunge from corporate life literally about 8 months ago. So I left a cozy little corporate world, and I now work as a marketing coach and social media coach for small businesses within the UK. And why did I get to Google Plus? I guess because my realization was that with the marketing and social media that I was doing, I'd be foolish not to become familiar with Google Plus. But it moved very quickly from a bit of a negative reason to come on to a really positive reason, because once I got onto Google Plus, I really enjoyed the nature of the connections and rapport and quality of connections that I was developing on Google Plus. So that's it from me, but you're all very welcome.
That was a good introduction.
Yeah,
I know more about you than I thought I knew. Well, as I said, I'm Sandra Watson. I teach the ABCs of Google Plus for your business and beyond. And I came here for many reasons, but certainly because of the social media and what it could do for my business. And I have had a fun ride, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because I think all of us can agree that it's been an interesting ride since we came here. Most people will admit readily that it wasn't what they expected, and it was different. Manny, I'm going to be really happy to introduce you next. Manny is the smiling one. I'm putting him on. I'm putting you on the big screen right now, Manny, because I want to talk about you while you're smiling.
Okay.
When I first met Manny, his avatar, I couldn't see his face very well, and so the first thing I said to him was, Manny, I can't see your bubbly personality and your smile, and I know you're a neuroscientist. I know that you came out of Harvard with a degree in psychology, psychiatrist, and ooh, I'd really rather see you smile than know that background, because it intimidates me, and what can I say to you? And so, Manny, after I've said all of this, I'd like for you to introduce yourself in the way that you want the audience to know you, not the way that I want them to know you.
Okay. Manuel St. Victor. I go by Dr. Manny. Well, obviously I go by Manny at home because my wife drops the doctor in a heartbeat. I went to Harvard undergrad. I went to UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine, and I studied psychiatry at University of Miami. 2 years into my psychiatry residency, I had been working hard to understand and master all this stuff, and it felt wrong. And the core reason that it felt wrong was that in my vision of my life, I would be helping family and friends with the things that I learned in medicine and healthcare and in psychiatry, you know, help them resolve their problems. And I felt as if every time someone came to me for advice, I was boxing them with some label that was like insulting my friends, which was, they kind of sucked. You know, like when some of my friends would be like, "I don't want to be around him, you'll get a diagnosis or something." I'm like, that's fantastic. So I decided to just let it go because I wasn't happy. I wasn't getting the time with my family that I wanted. And I felt like I was really wasting my life because that's not how I dreamed of living. I dreamed of living a full life with my wife and kid. To me, success involved a life where I had passion and purpose, and I felt like what I was doing was contributing something other than to my bank account. I mean, I don't mind the bank account thing, you know, but after a while it felt empty. And I looked around, and the people that I looked up to were basically burning money to fill the void. And I was like, screw this, bye. So I went and used, like, I've learned evidence-based medicine, so I went out and just started using the skills that I was taught over the 20 years that I was locked in the dungeon. I always call it the dungeon. And apply those skills to help people understand how their brains work, how their minds work, how your whole body functions as a system to survive in a social environment. That's what your brain is for. There's no magic to it. It's this thing that learns. Learning is the secret. It learns based on feedback what to do and how to improve and what to anticipate and expect next. And by getting to know the little cogs, the little tools, the tiny microseconds almost of who you are and what to do when you're stressed, when you're afraid, when you're sad, when you're in love, when you're lonely. By embracing those things and embracing the signal that's coming from your core compass, you'll live a life that means something. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, it wasn't.
Wow, it took me down a rabbit hole thinking.
I have to say I love the end bit as well, with your last few words in particular. Live a life that means something. I mean, you know, that really probably touches a number of us today without going into some of the breaking news and things. But I think that was beautifully put. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now that we're all on the brain mode.
Can I be a pain? Can I just put up an endorsement from Cheryl? You did tell me not to talk over you. My apologies. I'm so sorry, but I've got to put this up from Cheryl because Manny, that was a beautiful introduction, but really it all boils down to this. As Cheryl said, Manny St. Victor is my go-to brain dude. So
Thank you, Cheryl.
So forget everything else. That is a really elegant introduction.
She's gonna make me cry on camera and whatnot. That's not cool. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate it.
You know, I have to tell everybody this, that beforehand, this is the first time we've used the new upgrade to the comment tracker, and we had our stress time beforehand. But heck, we had Manny coming on, so we weren't too concerned that we wouldn't be able to talk to you through the show. However, it was pretty cool. Did you notice, Sean, that when you brought up Cheryl's, it also brings up her avatar, so people can see who is actually doing the comment?
I did notice that. Very, very good.
That's pretty darn cool, isn't it? So we're not going to be anonymous on Google Plus, are we?
Not at all.
Certainly not.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted to go into a little bit on this is that the three things that Sean and I did a lot of talking about this beforehand, and Manny, you and I did too. And just for the audience information, Sean and Manny did not meet until in the green room before the show. We wanted to keep this kind of impromptu so that it wasn't rehearsed or anything. However, Sean and I did talk about how we may have changed on Google Plus. My premise is that, yeah, I've changed because I realized that Google told me I had to be transparent and real. Not that I haven't been in life, but what was I willing to give up for Google Plus as far as my transparency? And I realized pretty quickly that I had to give up my transparency. Now, that didn't mean I shared everything, but it did mean that when I say gave up my transparency, I gave up the possibility of hiding and being transparent. Maybe I should correct that. And it was quite a psychological journal. And what I felt was that unwillingly, or unknowingly, Google Plus perhaps has created a psychological exercise in helping us become or realize who we are in a way that we wouldn't have done without being on Google Plus. Now, Sean and I talked about this at length, and he has some different ideas on maybe mine. And I said in one of my posts, I'm not going to tell you we agree, we disagree, or we decided to call it a truce between the three of us because we all have different opinions. However, today I think you're going to find out where we all stand and whether it's very down the road, very likable, and we all agree in a similar fashion, or hey, no, we don't. So, Sean, I'm going to ask you first to put out what you would like to on my comment on that. Do you think you have changed since you came to Google Plus, and do you think it was something that was not something you expected or intended?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating question because I'm not sure if intrinsically I'm any different as I would. Sorry, let me start the sentence again. The Sean that you see in front of you now, my belief isn't any different to the Sean that existed 8 months ago, 9 months ago before I came on Google Plus. In the sense that what made me passionate 9 months ago still makes me passionate. What I like sharing, you know, to groups of friends and communities in the real world, for want of a better way of putting it, I still like sharing. I struggle with this one only because I agree that we require to have a certain level of transparency on Google Plus, and I think that's a good thing. My struggle is that I don't know if that's any different to the transparency I would have if I started a new job or I met a new group of people, or the transparency I might have on Twitter or Facebook. So I think it's not that I disagree with you. And it's not about agreement and disagreement anyway. I think we've all got our unique and personal experiences, and they're right to us. But I don't know. If the central premise is Google Plus has changed me, for me personally, I'm not sure that it has. I may have done things slightly differently or learned new technical skills. So I haven't learned not to be verbose either. I still carry on being verbose, don't I? But I haven't. I don't think I've changed to get to the nub of it.
Okay, I'm going to pull up what Christine has to say here, and let's read this. The first thing I've heard is I'm on the Plus because I've heard it's the best place to market my business. If we lead with business, the focus cannot be on the relationship. My philosophy is make friends, be a friend, befriend, show up as who you are. I can't see all of it, Christine. And I think that that's a good way to put that. And I totally agree with that. Manny, let's put you on, see what you have to say.
I know Google Plus has changed me, and I tend to analyze everything a little bit. So the main way I think about it is that your brain stays in your head, your mind leaves your body and travels the world, and comes back with the footprint of whatever interaction it has had. If I grab my phone and I put my ear to the phone, and the person on the other side is somewhere, he's an African prince in Nigeria, and then he takes my credit card, he's changed my world model and probably my bank account. Okay, now what you have on Google Plus is an accelerated life experience where we see Cheryl's picture. My brain goes to working memory, it pulls up the model of Cheryl, so I'm in Cheryl's presence. If I like Cheryl, it brightens my day. Good thing I like Cheryl. Yeah, so I find that one thing is when you see something over and over again, or you see something over repeated in multiple people, that pattern changes the norms in your brain. So by surrounding myself with people on Google Plus that inspire me and energize me, I find that I move myself towards more optimism. If I'm feeling stressed about something, I can hop on here and change the way I think about things. If I'm having trouble with a neuroscience question, I go find the neuroscience guys, I pump out a couple of studies, and I'm like, this study hurts my head. And, a couple of guys, Kerry will jump on there, Raymond Cole will jump on there, John Keldon will jump on there, and we'll tackle it. They'll give me some of the stuff from the more semiotic point of view. I'll get the neuroscience point of view. I'll get trying to come on with a mathematical point of view. When I walk away from there, my intuition has different models. I'm thinking differently, and I'm thinking faster, because when I was doing research in undergrad and in med school, when I had a paper to do, I would go down to Widener basement, and it was dingy, and I think it was haunted, but that's tangential, and I would have like $50 in like dollar bills, and whatever study I thought would be relevant, I would scan it, and then I would staple the set together, and I'd go home with a backpack full of papers, and then I would highlight the parts that were relevant, and then I would stack them in and pay attention to all the time this takes now. I would stack the studies in categories based on which ones I would use in my paper, and that was my thesis, and I'm having a little PTSD, but work with me. Which ones are relevant, which ones were relevant if I needed more filler material in my, and then which ones I didn't trust, but I needed to go back to the library, which was across town, 45 minutes, to get better studies. And I sit down on here, I pull up a study, Google tells me studies that it thinks are related to it. Within minutes, while I'm still in sort of a curious state of mind, I've pulled up 7 studies from around the world and the corrections. I don't have to do extra highlighting, I can write it down, and I grab the best study, I hand it off to Kerry, and he's like, no BS. You know, I'll hand it off to someone else, and they'll be like, kind of, but not quite, you know? And I get like information back rapidly. And I think the key thing is, if you're someone who is influenced bottom up, if you let the universe push your brain around, then you're going to end up information flooded, because it just, there's no patterns and stuff. But if you approach it so that you're searching in a goal-directed, value-aligned way, you're basically able to swim through this information way faster in goal-directed hyperspeed. Like, I can learn like 1,000 times faster at least just by sitting down in the morning. I throw a question out there. First few articles I get, I look at who wrote the articles, I ping them, and I'm in their head. And all while sitting right here in my pajamas.
That's really interesting. Can I ask then? You know, see, you're making me think here, Manny, because I don't disagree with anything you've said. And if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that the accelerated speed of Google Plus allows you to assimilate and interact and engage with people far faster, and by definition that means it has changed your world. Is that a reasonable summary of what you've actually said?
Yep.
And I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I suppose where I was coming from is, has it fundamentally changed me? If there were an equivalent to Google Plus that wasn't Google Plus, would that equivalent do the same thing or not? I suppose that's what it boils down to. And probably I'm being really pedantic, but there was if you don't mind, Sandra, there was a comment by Zara that kind of said it for me. I'm just trying to find it now. Zara almost pretty much articulates what I was trying to say, which was this. So if everyone wants to have a quick look. Zara says, I'm on G+ because I kept reading David Amerland about search. I don't know if I've changed, but I've met people I've met people for conversations I've not had since I left San Francisco in 2004. I feel as though I'm not alone with thoughts. I love it, yes, inspired. So, okay, it's my interpretation, but Zara's saying she's not sure if she's changed, but she's making connections with people she might not otherwise have done, maybe at a speed she might not otherwise have done. So I kind of do agree with that, in fact.
But I think we can clean up the definition of changed, and the difference in mindful, goal-directed change and sort of chaotic, life-overwhelming you change. And I'll dip into a study real quick because it helps a little bit. There's a study that shows that early life stress changes your default mode network, which is kind of your ego function, use Freudian terms. It changes the way that fires, so that if you stress someone early enough, or if you put them in a really traumatic event, their whole default mode network starts firing in a way such that they feel as if the universe controls them versus them controlling the universe. It's like external versus internal locus of control. Now, someone who feels as if the universe controls them, you would see that as someone who's emotionally unregulated. They're not resilient. They don't feel like they have a lot of choices, and they go into what's called schema behavior. They're on autopilot all the time. They're not proactive. They're reactive. They're always back against the wall, and they make rapid decisions because they haven't taken the time to broaden their decision tree in the back. Like, a lot of people don't know the difference between sadness and anger. They just know to lash out. A lot of people, as soon as they feel a little bit of shame, they fire out at you. But with Google, there's a measure of safety where you meet someone and they might make you want to like barf breakfast, but later on you see a couple of other friends are talking to them, so you give them a second chance possibly because people you trust are trusting them. This is something that like usually I would erase someone from my mental model in a heartbeat. Boom, forgotten. You know? But to me it's like every time you pull a memory back, you're changing the wiring because you're myelinating it. So Google allows me to do, I think of it like push-ups. Cognitive yoga is what Craig Calvert partner calls it. It's like I spend some time with some folks who have a different worldview than me, a different model, and I listen to the model patiently if it's someone I trust in life, and curiously, and I take in a model that normally I would claim I was too busy for. They were living too far away. The phone bill was too high when long distance was a dime a minute or whatever. But now I'm just here taking in information from halfway around the world, digesting it, and I'm putting it into my existing schema. So it's not like it's changing me at the core, but that's because I take my core, and based on my core, I go out there seeking things for symbolic self-completion. I don't go out there looking for another identity. Yeah. So in that way, I'm not changing at the core, but that's because I know my core. People who don't know their core can go out there, and identity threat could make them feel like, well, I guess I don't know myself. And that's why it's important. Like one more study, and I promise, last study. There's a study that says that people with generalized anxiety disorder, when they become aware, and social anxiety disorder, any low self-esteem type complex, when they become aware of their feelings, they hyperreact because they're worried about decompensating. They think the worst. Whereas on the opposite side, people who have what's called a secure attachment, when they take a breath and they become aware of their feelings, it becomes your guiding signal. If I'm angry, then I can ask myself, okay, I'm angry. What is it that I'm angry about? And then it can be anger from 1 to 10. You have different representations from different levels of anger. You can separate shame from guilt so that you don't destroy your self-esteem every time you feel uncomfortable with something. And that's the mechanism of resilience, because you don't overreact, you don't underreact, and you put yourself ideally in the right position. That's how I see it as change.
Right.
It's like micro through repetition, through rapid life experiences, I become a refined version of who I am.
You know, I think Griswold Grimm came up and said something, and I can't get it to pin for whatever reason. Oh, I know why it won't. Now it will. It should pin up there. Nope, it's not pinned, is it? Okay.
I'll pop it up for you, Sandra.
Okay, thanks. He said, nothing can change your life faster than a new person coming into it, and people can come into your life faster in Google Plus than anywhere else. Or elsewhere. Sorry, I misquoted you. But I think that's really a very core matter that goes on here. We are constantly having new people come into our lives at a rapid speed, and it's causing us to have to react in a way that we never did in real life. And in my opinion, not on some of the other platforms that I have been involved with, in such a personal way. I'm not saying that on Twitter you don't have people come in and pass, but certainly on Facebook you have to approve them, and there's less chance of them being involved. But in such a personal way that we are actually interacting, that's the thing that I think is a very relevant key. And I think, Griswold, that's a good point. Sean, I mean, has that affected you in any way, or have you found that different, or is that just something we're noticing?
No, you can probably judge by looking at my expression that has given me food for thought. And what in particular has done that was perhaps I was getting a little too hung up on the definition of the word change. And what I enjoyed about the way Manny described it was it's not necessarily that the core part of you changes in the model that Manny described. It's what you allow and bring into that core part, and the level of interactions you've got through Google Plus is a different caliber of flow altogether. So before I lose myself down an amazing black hole somewhere of language, it has kind of persuaded me. I still think I'm the same Sean, but I have to agree that some of the interactions, for example, what we're doing now, I mean, the reality is I connected with a lot of people in the States well prior to Google Plus, and I've got good friends in the States, but I would never have done so at the speed that we're doing now. From my side of the pond, were it not for things like Hangouts. So in that, and when I do a Hangout, I always come away having learned something. So that does kind of segue into what Manny was saying. So I'm now going to totally change my view and make this totally non-controversial by agreeing with everybody. How about that?
Well, we know, Sean, you're not chewing your earbuds yet, so we're still
Not
safe.
yet. I might do in a minute. Get
Okay,
stressed.
Manny, you know, Christine Bowen just said something, and for whatever reason, I don't know, my little thing is not working, Christine, so I'm just going to read it. Actually, maybe I won't now, because now I can't. Okay. Oh, Christine.
Oh, hang on. I've got it. Let me put it on for you.
Where she's talking about Twitter.
Here we go.
Okay.
Do you want to read it?
Okay, you can read it.
Oh, okay. Christine, how so, Griswold Grimm? I find that I make quick connections on Twitter and Instagram also. I believe that it's perceived to be more so on the plus because more senses are incorporated. Interesting point.
You know, Manny, I think that's a good one for you because of the senses that are involved and the emotions. And you and I have talked about how Google Plus does seem to, well, I'm going to let you tell it.
Okay. Well, the first thing is that when you're on Facebook, you kind of have like your value system defined because, you know, next thing you know, you're, poking grandma, you know, to use that joke. And it's like, oh, why? They could have picked a different word for it. But it makes it very evident, and the teenagers are leaving because of this, that you're surrounded by your value system that was defined for you from the outside. When you tumble into G+, it's not populated enough yet where you're constrained to a definition system. You land in the middle of collective consciousness, is how I think of it. Now from there, you ask yourself subconsciously, what are the things that affect your, and I'll go back to, we discussed this back in the green room, your brain is really your heart and the brain part. That's where your emotions come from, your heart rate. Like when your heart's beating really fast, you're either anxious, or if you trust the person, you feel good. You know, you're like thrill versus fear. So now, if you want to know what at the core affects us subconsciously, it's eye contact. It's smiles, because a smile is half conscious, half unconscious. If you smile and you mean it, it's a symmetric smile. If you smile and you don't mean it, you don't pull in a set of muscles, you get an asymmetric smile, which is Mitt Romney, smile of contempt. People spot that immediately. Unconsciously, you're like, I don't like your smile. You know, or you're like, it's a smirk, or you're being condescending. Any asymmetric facial expression subconsciously hits us hard. Eye contact hits us hard in the heart rate. When you look at someone who their pupils are dilated, and this is the atropine thing the Egyptians, I think, used to do to make themselves more attractive to the men, when your pupils dilate, it means arousal. So looking at a woman's picture with her pupils dilated make her more attractive to you. You know, and just subconsciously, and that your heart responds, increased likelihood of mating, which is at the core what got us this far millions of generations later. But so when you're on G+ and you're doing you get eye contact with someone and they're smiling and you're joking, you get the synchrony. That's attunement. This is the same mechanism that a mother teaches a child how to live, how to express their emotions. You look at the person and your brains are firing in synchrony. If you watch the two of you, your brains are firing at the same rhythm because that's attunement. That's relationship. That's I like this person. Your oxytocin goes up. You're in a warm bath of happy. You can't get that anywhere else.
You know, Manny, one of my thoughts on this was, too, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, we have become very engaged with certain personalities, if you will, certain persons at the beginning and through that, and then all of a sudden they kind of drop off. They're gone. And I know that happens in other social medias. I mean, this is not the only one it does, but to me, it's the one that you are able to make that connection like you talked about. I mean, we get to see their eyes, we get to see their facial expressions, their bodies. And then all of a sudden, they've gone. Is it because, and I'm not going to go into what that does to us, but what my point was, is it because they figured out or learned that this is not a place that makes them comfortable because of what's going on, because of what you're talking about, the being able to see each other? Maybe they're concerned that we're going to figure them out, perhaps, or, and I know people get sick. I know there's other things, so let's not bring that into it. Let's just talk about this kind of thing. Is there a possibility that they have figured out who they were? They didn't want to change to be maybe more transparent, or whatever. What is your take on that?
I think this platform, and I think Peter has a tool, a semantic thesaurus, that he can give you your name and tell you the words that map around you. Mine is consciousness, so I'm cool with that. It's like, but your behavior every day on a subconscious level is a set of patterns that you don't even realize that you're doing because you're stuck in frame one. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the way you constitute the self, the way you recognize who you are, is often looking back and saying, did I just do that? I can't believe I did that. Now, when someone is not in touch with their core compass, like they don't have their core values consciously defined, they walk around in autopilot. They do things because they're angry. They do things because they're overwhelmed. They do some things because they feel ashamed. They do things based off jealousy, identity threat. These are rigid scripts that run on autopilot. They're exaggerated, they're embarrassing, and they're awkward. Until you learn how to pull yourself out of the autopilot, what we call the lizard brain sometimes for simplicity, it's called an amygdala hijack. Someone makes you feel threatened, and next thing you know, you're acting like, you're acting like you don't want to in a public place, and it's out there. It's out there, and you feel like everyone saw it. But once you move to the point where you know what your values are, you know what you stand for, and you've got them articulated on you've got them written on a piece of paper, like my first priority is this, my second priority is this. When something comes up and it's an identity threat, when something comes up and someone makes you like want to go through the roof, you remind yourself, you evoke your core values, and you're like, okay, integrity, that comes first. And integrity is more important than blasting someone out of the water in the troll war. My core values are like self-differentiation, clarity. I happen to be high value for my family and mastery. Now, with me, I'm not going to sit around and argue with someone over something where at the end of this discussion, I'm not going to have learned more about the subject. I don't have the time, energy, or patience. And a lot of times I'll tell people, I'm like, this will be the last time I read any of your messages, enter. And then they go, whatever, they go into like subconscious epileptic mode because now they want to yell to be heard and they want to talk about you behind your back on other places. I'm like, oh, I'm so sad that I stopped paying attention to you now. I have a limited amount of attention on this planet. I have a limited amount of time on this planet, and I'm going to put my attention and my time into my family, to people that energize and inspire me, to opportunities to learn new things and develop mastery. I'm not wasting my time or energy on anything that's not on my value list. It's not valuable to me. It's a waste of my time. And people don't get that. It's bad when an entire human becomes a waste of time, but every day in your real life you have to practice this, and G+ is a good way to practice. You're like, okay, I don't like the way this person makes me feel. And then they'll intrude into your psychic boundaries. They'll tell you how you feel, and then you try to express yourself, and they tell you how you feel again. You're like, I know how I feel now, at ease. And you uncircle, and you turn your back.
Wow, I think you just opened up a whole can of worms for some people, because a lot of people don't have the ability to say delete or mute or adios.
It destroys your self-esteem. It destroys your self-esteem because what you've done is you've enmeshed yourself in someone else's definition of you, and usually someone who takes the liberty of reaching into your sense of self and putting their poison, projecting their negativity, projecting their pessimism. You tell them your dream, they reach in and they tell you you can't do it, and if you stick around long enough, you'll believe that. When at the end of the day, when you say, I'm hungry, empathy isn't, no you're not. Or if you're saying, hey, I want to see you, or if a child falls over and says his leg is hurt, you're like, oh, you're looking for attention. God forbid a child looks for attention from a parent. When you have your emotions, your core values are triggered, the next step is to create a habit of having people around you who empathize, recognize it, mirror it back to you, help you feel better about it, and then maybe share some of theirs or an experience that they had so you can learn. If not, you're wasting your time, life, energy, attention with that person, and they're destroying your self-esteem and sense of value.
Oh, sorry, you're about to ask, Sandra.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Sean. You've got that contemplative.
I've got that raised right eyebrow, contemplative expression of mine. I guess what I was thinking was, with regard to the core values, Manny. Again, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that because you're so attuned to your core values, it's not that challenging for you to when an event doesn't mesh up to your core values, you'll appraise whether you still want to engage with that person or thing. And if you don't, then you'll make a rational decision not to. It's not an emotional one. There won't be outbursts, and you'll still be respectful of the other person. So my question then is, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, but could you not do that on other platforms? Because because one thing that does occur to me is we're talking about Google Plus as if everybody on Google Plus posts, everybody on Google Plus uses Hangouts, everybody on Google Plus uses associated YouTube channels, and maybe there are those that don't. So for those that don't, there's not really a great deal of difference perhaps for those people who aren't using every facility on Google Plus. It isn't that different a platform for those people than maybe Twitter or Facebook, because they're only using a little bit of it. And then we've got your core value statement, which is really fascinating as well. I don't know quite what my question is, but it boils down to, you know, is the core values distinction you're making particular to Google Plus or not? That's I guess.
No, it's not. It's a way of being. It's a way of living. When you see someone who is addicted to exercise, you're like, oh, exercise is addictive. Video games are addictive. Life is addictive. Food is addictive. Breathing is addictive. If you stop doing it, things go badly. At the end of the day, your brain works in either top-down or bottom-up mode. Okay.
Right.
When you have a clear sense of your identity, which a platform like this allows you to discover by making mistakes, meeting people, kind of being like, I don't like this group, I'm going to stop hanging out in this group. On Facebook, there's a history, there's a tradition, there's family. If you drop off Facebook, your phone will ring from everybody from high school on, checking on why, And when you say something like on Facebook, and if my dad's watching, I'll just laugh about this. My dad called me. He's like, your aunt is on Facebook now, and my aunt is spiritual. She's a bit conservative, and he's like, well, be careful what you post. And I'm like, yeah, buckle up. And my aunt got used to it. I'm not gonna change. That's the point is, you're not going to reach inside my boundaries. I will respect yours, but these are my boundaries. You get in the habit of realizing how people respond when you're expressing yourself, when you're trying to let out what you're feeling, when you're looking for affirmation. And your core values, if you look at other words that have value in it, evaluate, invalidate, devalue, valence,
Manny, I think you just hit on a very key subject or a key point, and that is this is one platform where we are able to really voice what we think. Once we are a little comfortable here, we are able to then go out and say, okay, this is what I think about this, and we can do it in a short way or a long way or a medium way. That's up to us. But in other platforms, we are limited in some of that. And all of a sudden now, people are able to come back and give us feedback on that, where when we're in our own, in real life, I'll use that now because some people on the stream have mentioned, this is real life, it's just on the internet. But when I'm in relations that I have built before I came here that I can call on the phone easily, I've known everything, I don't always say some of those things, but now I'm able to do that and get feedback that I never got before and was not around. And so all of a sudden now I'm having to look at me in a different way, because what I may have felt was part of me, maybe it wasn't, because now I'm getting the feedback, so I'm able to evaluate it and say, no, I guess I didn't really mean it that way, maybe, or no, I really did mean it that way, and that is part of my core value. And I want to take a moment here for anybody that's watching or listening. We did post a URL link at the very beginning of the event page for you to go find Manny's little short paper on how to determine your core values. If you don't already know what they are or how to determine that, I think, we use the word core values and some people are like, okay, whatever. But I think that is a real key thing that you just pointed out.
Actually, sorry, Manny, forgive me. I just saw a comment by Christine, which I thought was very informative. I'll just pull that up now. So Christine makes another really good point. When approaching the social media space in a professional manner 4.5 years ago, I built my brand and conduct myself, and I align myself based on my core values. So, I think that makes an important point about taking your core values out into the world and being consistent with them wherever you present yourself. Or at least that's the way I interpret it anyway.
Yeah. Once you know your core values and you've made them conscious, you can update them from time to time as you grow and you explore. But I use like 4 basic ones where it's like self-enhancement on one end, and on the opposite end is like kind of helping grow like self-transcendence. So on the self-enhancement end, you have stuff like power, hedonism, stuff like that. Now on the other end, you have conservatism, and you have openness to change. Now, at the end of the day, all this relates to what's called working memory. Working memory is combined with attention is consciousness. It's what you're experiencing. It's what your reality feels like right in the present. Now, what happens is core values, when you put them down on paper and you look at them a couple of days later, you've integrated those things into your narrative self. You have your experiencing self and your narrative self. Your narrative self is the story you tell yourself about who you've been. It's the predictions you make about where you will be in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years if you continue to align with the arrow or trajectory you set. If you look at it and it doesn't make you feel passionate, it doesn't make you feel a purpose, it's time to sit down and reevaluate those. Every time you do something that's not aligned with your core values to meet your needs, you're taking a piece out of your self-esteem. You know, and a lot of people don't know the difference between shame and guilt. The difference between shame and guilt is that you do something, you get feedback, negative, from your community or from internal voices that were embedded into you through childhood. Now, if you say to yourself, I'm such a terrible person, I can't believe I did that, and you can't look at your core values as a measure of self-awareness and say, you know, I actually don't value those things. I was behaving in a way that was not aligned with my values. In that case, I need to stop doing that. Whereas guilt is an action.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I interrupted you. My apologies. It's because what you were saying had such a resonance with me. It just occurred to me that one of the areas of tension that I think a lot of us see with people is where, and we touched on this in the green room, where their core values are not necessarily core values of their own. What's happened is they've allowed core values, if you like, to be imposed upon them. And you were talking about this, from society, from culture, from what they believe should be values. So, for example, we know people who've got fantastically high-paying, high-status jobs that really just want to be a writer or an artist, and that would satisfy their core values more. But their mom and dad wanted them to be a lawyer or a dentist or a doctor
or a psychiatrist.
Or a psychiatrist. So what's your take on that, Manny? How are there people who struggle to actually authentically find their own core values because they're so stuck in what they feel they should be doing?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of a platform like G+. Before G+, and before like social media overall, just to kind of broaden it, you're stuck geographically, you're stuck in a group where it's dangerous, it's risky to step outside of your group. Like with me, everyone was used to me in a white coat, stethoscope, tie. You know, when you meet someone, anytime you get threatened, you pull up your identity threat, you go into doctor mode. But your journey through life to personal development, to a healthy, self-aware, conscious being is, at first, you have to identify, it's identification. You wander, you look at a lot of different things, and you think about how they feel to you. And then you find the thing that you like. You see a bunch of people doing something, a group doing something. You find a role model in that group. And you take on and you develop a certain degree of mastery of what that person does. But as part of that group, you take the time and you're like, you know, there's certain parts of this that don't resonate with who I am. And that's individuation that Jung talks about. At that point, you have to look at your core values, and the group is doing this, and it's your time to rise above the standards of the group. You compare your ideal to what's called a cultural script. The script is what you look around and you say, I'm that guy, you know? Like you see all the kids wearing their pants extra baggy because when they hear the music with the anger, they're like, yes, I feel that way, okay? You emulate and you assimilate. But at some point, you have to take your core values and rise above that. You have to say to yourself, like with me, I always wanted to be a doctor because when I was younger, it was like, A, I could help people, and B, I really like that 7 Series BMW. You know, it was really pretty. But then you get there and you have these things and you're with these people and and I don't mean these people like I'm outgrouping them, but you got to take the time every day when you wake up and you're headed to do the thing that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life and say, how am I feeling? Like, and with me, I wanted, like, I was like, yo, if only I could fall asleep and like get hit head on, then I wouldn't embarrass my parents with a suicide.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I felt every day.
That is not that really. That's sorry.
Yeah. No, that's the response. That's the subconscious response. It's inevitable. That's countertransference. Yeah. Because it's like how do you respond to that? But that's how it felt. I'd be driving in and I was like, you know, and sometimes like your brain does weird things where I'm like, if I had a wreck, I'd be in the hospital and I would probably get to sleep for a couple hours. You know, you get like that, like where you're like, I just want to be away from here, you know. And then sometimes when someone's dying, and I remember, and this is kind of a graphic story, and I'll make it less graphic, but I had a young man who was in a rollover accident and both his legs were like severed. And I had to call his family and they came in and I was explaining to them that he had like about 2 hours to live. And so it was like, go see your son and say your goodbyes, whoever could drive in and whatever. And it was like about 4 in the morning and I come off of like a 20-something, it was usually 24 to 30-hour calls. This was before they put the 24-hour rule in place. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I wish they would hurry up and get it done so I could sign off on this paperwork and go home and sleep. And then you hear yourself say something, you're like, what have I become? You know, you're like, what have I become? Where, you know, I'm sitting here like someone is saying goodbye to their dying son and like he's exsanguinating, and all I could think about is, God, if y'all take too long, I'm gonna have to write an extra report and put different times, and then I gotta be in a morbidity mortality. If he dies on my shift, I have to do a Monday report. Crap. No, when that becomes you, you're like, oh, I gotta change this. Something went terribly bad in my path.
Well then, okay, let's go back then. One of the things that, I mean, you brought up how you recognized you needed to change because that wasn't your core value, Manny. And then how does that relate? I believe that when you're here, I mean, what we're doing now is helping us evaluate some of that in our own way. Each one of us is doing that right now, but we become aware of the self, we become aware of the group, and then we become aware of Google+. Because there's three segments here. And you know, when I was talking to someone recently, and we were talking about how they recognized that all of a sudden they had become or were doing things that they never would have done before, and that was because of the group. The group said they should do it. The group said this was the way to do it. The group said to do this. And you just were talking about the group, and that's part of the change that I refer to, is that you recognize that, hey, wait a minute, the individual of me, have I always been that way? Have I always lean towards letting other people maybe influencing me more than what my core values wanted me to do? And you and I talked about this, Manny, at one point, and you said something which I think is really probably something that's very clear. And that is, maybe we don't change so much as that perhaps this is something that's always been us that we might have found out later on, but Google+ accentuates it or accelerates it. Right. My comment back to you was maybe we would never have found it out because we wouldn't have been put in the situation to accelerate it in any way. And I think that's something that, you know, maybe in the last few minutes we could explore just a little bit, because Sean's moving, it might make him uncomfortable, and Sean and, and Manny's grinning. So, okay, what do you think, guys?
Oh well,
wow!
Manny should go first. I think he's the authority.
I like that. Thank you. I'm blushing. Thank you. Every minute of your life that you do something, if it's something different than what you've done in the past, you're going to pull a memory back and you're going to update the related memories. The more time you spend experiencing things, the more you explore, the more you walk around, the more different ways of thinking that you look at. When you come back to your core self, it's going to change the way what they call your default mode network fires. It fires like the more experiences you have that you overcome, the more challenges you face, the more confident you are. And you don't freak out until you hit a wall where you have what's called unescapable threat. As long as you think you have a choice, like I can fight or I can run, the mere fact that you have a choice puts you in a state of mind where you're less anxious. And if you have a history of trying again and persevering, and you've been on your back before and you've gotten up, and you've been on your back with heavy things on your chest and you've gotten up, you develop a certain degree of self-efficacy where when a challenge comes up, you're like, bring it. Like, bring it. You know, it's like things are hard now, but checking in my past, like, if I die, I'll die fighting. And I feel sorry for the person up against me on the other side of that, because after you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice, and then you practice and you practice and you practice, and and the main thing is you got to practice retrieving what matters to you. You got to, when a situation comes up and you make a decision, don't let the environment make the decision for you. Like, pull up what matters to you. Does your family matter to you? Does peace alone time matter to you? Does sleep matter to you? I really got to love sleep, like my 30-year residency. What matters to you? Make the decision such that the higher thing on your value priority list is honored. And then if it's the second or third, do that. Otherwise, you're destroying your self-esteem because you're taking away your sense of agency. You know, core values are about awareness. It's about waking up. It's about consciousness.
You have talked a lot about self-esteem here today, Manny, so I'm assuming that one of your beliefs of Google Plus is that it does either help destroy your self-esteem or help increase your self-esteem while you're here engaging, if you are actually engaging. Is that correct?
It depends on mindset. The key thing is to not target self-esteem. They made a major mistake in the self-help movement, improving people's self-esteem. What you want to target is self-acceptance, getting to know yourself and realizing with as much precision as you can who you are. Because with self-esteem, if you have low self-esteem, when you have a self-esteem threat, you self-enhance downwards. You put other people down. You look at flaws in people. But if you have a healthy self-esteem, what happens is when you're in an identity threat or when you feel overwhelmed, you aspire. So self-esteem was kind of the wrong target in that way. That a lot of people went to do self-esteem, self-enhancement, and they ended up bullying. They end up, they get a trophy for whatever. It's like the person who gets a gold medal or a silver medal feels worse than the person who got the bronze medal.
Yeah, it's interesting. So are you saying, this is just totally left field, just based on entirely what you've just said, are you saying then that parts of the self-esteem movement, if you like, parts of the self-development billion-dollar business that's become are wrong, and they're directed at the wrong thing, Manny?
Yeah, it's toxic.
It's interesting.
Because when you tell someone to fix your self-esteem, a lot of people do so by projecting whatever negative things they have. They vomit it onto someone else, and like, I hate black people, I hate women, I hate short people, I hate fat people, whatever.
Right.
And it feels better for a while, but then you get these narcissistic, obsessed with not doing introspection type of mindsets. Self-acceptance is what works, because you come to realize that when I'm around big muscly guys, I worry. And then you get to know that that's your thing. You can avoid big muscly guys until you do something. Hit the gym a bit. You're able to do more like self-aware behaviors. You're like, this is me. I may not be smart, I may not be funny, I may be clumsy, I may not be attractive, I may not, whatever. And those are your things. And then you turn your attention to the things that you are good at, because when those other things come around, it's not about faking it or covering them up or pointing and it's distracting to someone else who doesn't do them well, but accepting those are not your strengths and finding teammates and people to support you that have those strengths yet are mature enough to not be threatened by your strengths.
I really love that distinction. Sorry, man, are you still talking? But the sound's cut off at this end. My apologies. Sorry.
No, I'm good.
Well, we're getting to the end. We could go on for another hour,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Exactly.
I really believe that would be the case. Whether or not everybody would stay with us for an hour, maybe not. But, one of the things I promised Manny in the description of this event was that you would talk about BEO, which is not bad body odor or something like that. I don't know.
No.
But I'm going to let you give the definition of what BEO is and talk about it just a little bit before we give our goodbyes and our accolades and all that.
BEO is brain engine optimization, and the first phase in BEO is core value alignment. And it's a system that Craig Calvert and I came up with over the last few years of systematic strategic decision making, where you know where you are when you're there, and you know that you've checked off all the boxes before you make a decision. And it's good for individual strategic decision making and for collective strategic decision making. And it looks at a lot of things like memetics, semiotics, cognitive neurodynamics. It's the mathematical concepts involved in working with a team of people. And in our current culture, being in business is about working with a team of people that are interacting with you. And so you want to optimize your message, not to be found in search, but to surround yourself with people who love you, support you, and are able to get you to where you want to get while you're helping them in symbolic self-completion. So brain engine optimization is finding the right terrain for competition and collaborating, cooperating, and nurturing those around you that resonate with your message.
That's very good. You know, I'm thinking, Manny, at some point, one of the things that you brought up in one of your videos that I found very good was the intuitive versus the sensing personality, or the personality is not the right. What do you use the word?
The cognitive functions? Yeah, the preference.
Yes, thank you. That we didn't even get a chance to get into that. So maybe sometime in the future we can do another one of these and go into some of those, because there's so much, and it is part of who we have become or are becoming. However, I mean, for me, that's how I look at it. I'm never stagnant. I'm always going someplace. I'm always changing, if you will. And you know, I used Google Plus as a good example because I felt that they had designed unwittingly a very good psychological exercise.
I agree.
So whether or not it changed you or just helped you become more of who you are, that's a term for discussion, Mr. Sean, that you and I can continue a lengthy one on.
Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask Manny, if it doesn't interrupt your flow, Sandra, if there is so much we could talk about, and there's so much great information you've already shared with us, but if there were one or two key things that you'd like to leave us with out of this hugely massive subject, what would those key messages be?
Get to know and love yourself before you try to get other people to love you.
Hey, that's cool. I like that. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, that's a good one to end on. That's a lot of thought-provoking and a lot of stuff to think about. I think this has been really good. I think, you know, for people that want to know a little bit more about how Google Plus can change them, maybe, or not, this is a good video to watch. If you want to know more about yourself, it's certainly a good one to watch, I think. Sean, what would you like to leave everyone with?
Oh, I would. It sounds as though I'm just emulating what Manny has said, but you know, in my sort of experience of management coaching and things like that, I often find the biggest dissonance with clients is when there's a part of them that they just don't know. And sometimes you go in to coach them on a certain thing, and it's not that thing at all that's troubling them. It's something else about their own self-knowledge or other behaviours. So I would just, what I would like to leave is pretty much Manny's message. You know, get to know and get to be in touch with yourself first, and then everything else happens after that.
One thing I can tell everybody that's watching is I think that the three of us have gotten to know each other better through this HOA, this Hangout on Air.
Definitely.
And certainly the people that have commented in the stream, we want to thank you, because it has helped me personally, and I'm sure Manny and Sean would agree, to get to know you better. I mean, your comments and your engagements help us to interact and grow together and decide whether or not we want to even interact in the future. That's what Google Plus is about, and that's what knowing the basic ABCs of Google Plus allows you to do. You can go forward, you can do it with confidence. You know, until you have those basic tools, it's a little bit difficult. When you first come, you sit back and you just watch and you get intimidated, but then there's a point, if you stay with it, that the intimidation ends and you go like a lion. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Rock 'em the Blocks with the ABCs of Google+. Thank you, Manny, for being here. I appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy man. Is there anything you would like anybody to know about what you do as far as your business? Would you like to say anything about that as we say goodbye?
Sure. Drop by mindful360.com, and we offer services across various fields of expertise. And if you don't see what you're looking for, contact us, and we'll be open to discuss whatever you want to get sorted out. We have Dr. Ritvo, who has 25 years of psychiatric experience. Craig Calvert is a trained psychometrician, and I'm there as well. So we've effectively found a different way of getting you to live a more fulfilled life without the labeling and the psychological battery.
Okay, would you put your link in the stream below when we're finished with the show, Manny, so that everybody can find it easily?
Sure, sure.
Okay, well,
thanks, Sandra.
We're going to say goodbye. It's 1 hour, and we appreciate your time. And as we leave, Sean, let's do our thing.
We're doing our thing, are we? Right, here we go.
Okay, here we go, guys.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Google Plus for you and me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye. See you next time.